Today, Gaming America is speaking with Ross Fruin, the co-founder and CEO of GridRival, a startup pushing a new approach to sports betting in fantasy racing. Thank you for speaking with us today, Mr. Fruin.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Cameron.
Pleasure is all ours. First question, before we get into GridRival, I wanted to know more about you. What's your career been like, and how did you get to this place in the sort of fantasy racing world?
Yep, good question. So, kind of lifelong entrepreneur. Always worked for myself or run companies in one way, shape, or form. Before GridRival, I started and ran a digital media buying agency. So we managed advertising for vendors on, Facebook, Instagram, Google, Bing. At the height of that business, we were managing somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year on on ad spend online. And so I had some experience, growing audiences, which I knew was going to be a big part of the success of this. And GridRival actually started kind of as a little bit of an accident. It was a side hustle, and I started it way back in 2017, really with very little ambition to grow it into a business. But it kind of came as the result of me being a lifelong motorsports fan and not really a traditional sports fan. And so every year I always saw my friends playing, season-long fantasy football and doing March Madness, and eventually just kind of got sick of the inability to take part in that level of engagement around the sports that I love. And so we had built a season-long fantasy Formula One game, purely kind of for fun. We had a little bit of an idea of, if it grew to enough users, we could make some money off advertising or affiliates, marketing, but didn't have anywhere the ambition to bring it into a real money gaming product. And then we turned it online in March of 2017. We signed up about 22,000 users our first week that we were online. And for obvious reasons, I started paying a lot more attention to what we had just done. And then kind of fast forward 18 months, PASPA was repealed. I had the opportunity to exit my last business, and a lot of things lined up for me to go do it full time. So that's kind of the genesis of it, and a little bit of my background prior.
Sure. Well, moving on to GridRival itself, I was hoping you could give our viewership sort of the spiel of it. What is GridRival? Yep. What does it offer? And perhaps what hole in the market what gap in the market does it fill?
Yeah, so I think the gap in the market is that motorsports fans typically, or at least a very large percentage of them, are usually not traditional sports fans. So we are constantly doing surveys and polling our customers. And one of the questions we always ask is like, what sort of race fan do you consider yourselves? Exclusively a race fan, mostly a race fan, or kind of a third category, which is like, I like racing, but I like other sports as well. And usually about half the audience is that kind of exclusive or mostly category. And I think that would be true of the greater motorsports audience as well. And so when we've looked at the industry, there's a lot of the sports betting products or real money fantasy gaming products either have no motorsports coverage at all, or, deep in the end of a, category of all the sports, there's this thing called motorsports where everything possible is kind of stuffed into there. And so there really has been an inauthentic attempt to engage the audience as a whole. And so that's really what we're trying to do. As far as what the product is, kind of going back to the story I just told, to this very day, as the day that we record this, September 14th, it is a free play season-long fantasy league platform. Sometime in the next, fingers crossed, 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to be rolling out our first real money gaming product. So that'll be kind of a daily fantasy salary cap game that's going to launch in 25 states here in the United States, followed by most of Canada. And then we actually got our UK gaming license about 3 months ago. We should be live in the UK probably end of year, early next year. And then kind of from there, the plan is to move. That's like you can think of it as a pool gaming product where you're joining, you're playing with other people. The next iteration of the product that we want to build is more of like a kind of traditional sports betting product, moving more and more towards the sports book model.
Yeah, but you'll stay within the bounds of motor racing.
Correct.
I was wondering, just to be clear, what does motor racing encompass?
Yeah, so our definition really in terms of like what what sports we're going to continue to follow is like anything that's powered by an engine or a motor and has wheels. So that
Hmm.
could be four or two. It might be more in some circumstances if there's a unicycle racing league or something that comes up down the road. But for the most part, I think it's going to be some of your major sports: IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One, MotoGP, Formula E, World Rally are going to be some of the major sports that we focus on early on, and then from there we're going to kind of look at like where is there a mix of a larger audience, and I say that relatively to the rest of the motorsports audiences, that is kind of located in areas where we can capitalize on them from a monetary perspective, right? Meaning where if they're in places that we can legally operate. And so what those series are today might be different from a year from now with how quick this space is changing. But anyways, long answer to your question: wheels and an engine.
Yeah. And sort of what markets are the most important for you? I mean, I know NASCAR is say big in the South, or you have Formula One. You said you mentioned opening up in the UK, and I know that's big
Yep.
in the UK. So, what would you say are the most important markets?
Yeah, I mean, the ones we're focused on and probably will be focused on for the next, you know, foreseeable future, I'll just say 3 to 4 years for sure, are just the United States, Canada, and the United
Hmm.
Kingdom. And I think stepping outside of those will just be a case of, where is there overlap between our audience and a regulatory climate that's relatively less complex. And I say that relatively because none of them are simple, right? But some
Hmm.
are more simple than others, or maybe more advantageous for the type of product that we're building. And so if we expand outside of those three geographies, it'll be because we see kind of an opportunity to penetrate the audience in a way where we don't have to go through like maybe the same licensing hurdles we'd have to go through in what they're proposing in California, right? Where it's gonna be $100 million fee. So, and then as far as sports go, kind of like I already said, I think the core four we're going to be working on the next 12 months are going to be Formula One, MotoGP, IndyCar, NASCAR. And then I think we'll look at expanding in the same philosophy, right? Where is there an audience that's ready? Where is there an audience that's digital savvy? What series have the biggest overall audience in those markets that we operate in?
Sure, sure. And you mentioned you're going to be offering real money betting very soon. I was wondering if you could talk a
Yep.
bit about that and about what you've had to do as a company to transition into that.
Yeah, great question. So the first thing we had to do is raise a lot of money. As you
Hmm.
probably know, it's an expensive barrier to get through.
Yeah.
And so when we launched our free play product, our whole goal was to be able to go raise venture capital, with the traction that we proved. So we have about 200,000 registered users on that free play game, and that was compelling enough to be able to go raise a seed round, which we closed last September, that was oversubscribed and was about $4 million. And the whole point of that goal was, whole point of that round was to get our real money gaming product. And so I think like I'd bucket the things you have to get through in a couple categories. One is, you have to hold customers' money. So you have to go through whatever barriers are required to be able to do that. You have to get banking relationships, to be able to hold customer funds. We built our own digital wallet and kind of the bones of a player account management system. So KYC, geolocation, our ledgering technology that keeps track of how much money people have and how much they played with and deposited and withdrawal and won and lost.
Hmm.
Um, and then the next big piece is like the compliance piece, right? Ensuring that you comply with the anti-money laundering policy and Bank Secrecy Act and all of these different things. And of course, they're a little bit different in the U.S. than they are in the U.K. And then the last part is just actually the engineering and construction and building of the game mechanics themselves, the actual application. And so
Hmm.
those three things have kind of been the core focus for the past 12 months to get this thing out the door.
Sure, sure. And how about the marketing side? How do you get the word out? I know you're a startup, you're a young company. How does that work?
Yep. So historically, there's been a number of things that have worked very well for us that probably would not work if we were in traditional sports, and one of those is paid ads. That's something we are relying less and less on, But I think the reason it's worked really well is because number one is my background, so I have a lot of familiarity with it and how to make it work in a competitive space. But I think a lot of it has to do with if you're an NFL, like American football fan, you see ads for FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM and Caesars and all these apps nonstop. I mean, you're constantly seeing them. Whereas, if you're a motorsports fan and you see something that's an ad that's unique to a motorsports specific platform, it's probably the first time in your life you've ever seen that ad. And so we've had the benefit of kind of an audience that's ready for something. And so our average cost to acquire a registered user has historically over the past 3 years that we've been running our free play game has been under $2. Over half of our users have come from referrals from other users, and so the unit economics have been very enticing on kind of the paid advertising medium. Some of the other things that we've been testing over the past 12 months have been working with influencers. We've sponsored some esports leagues. The motor racing, sim racing world is starting to grow very quickly. And so there's a very, very kind of dedicated subset of users there that overlap very well with us, right? They're diehard motorsports fans and they're gamers at the same time. So very, very solid audience for us. Those are some of like the early things we're doing. And then we continue to be really obsessive about, how can we not pay for users, right? And so one of the things we constantly think about is how can one user create another user? And so in a lot of the game mechanics that we build, we're always thinking about how can we make this easy to invite somebody? How can we make the game inherently a game that's more fun when there's friends involved? And so that's been a continued focus as well.
Sure. I wanted to ask sort of a more general question, or I guess it's two questions really. One is, what do you think betting could offer the world of fantasy sports? And the second is, what do you think betting could offer the world of racing?
Betting to fantasy sports, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I kind of look at the two as a little bit separate. I think fantasy sports are much more inherently community driven, camaraderie driven, social. In the United States, they're literally different legally, and so I think like it's kind of a entirely different subset of a product. I think what betting can offer motorsports is a tremendous engagement medium. I think NASCAR is a series that's looking at this with the exact right lens, which is if you talk to Joe Solosky, who's the managing director of sports betting over there, they'll tell you that revenue from sports betting is not necessarily their number one goal. Not that it isn't their goal, but they really look at it as a medium to further engage the fan, right, and drive broadcast revenue and kind of have a halo effect of some of the other things that it can influence. And so I look at sports betting as it relates to motorsports, and I think all sports in general, as an engagement medium, right? It's a tool to further drive the depth and experience that people have with the sports they watch, which I think is a critical piece. And obviously, sports betting is only one piece, but I just think that any sports series that's not focusing on, how do they engage fans outside of just a traditional broadcast is going to start to really struggle. And so, with sports like Formula One specifically, if you look at the ways that you can engage with that sport that are not just watching it. I mean, they've in the past 5 to 6 years, I think those methods and ways that you can engage have grown by a magnitude of order, which is going to be really important for the next generation fans. So I think long answer your question, I think sports betting is just one of those things. I obviously think it might be one of the most powerful because when you have money on the line, it changes the dynamic of how you experience things.
Sure. And yeah, not to plug myself, but in one of these Gaming America Huddle interviews, I did interview Joe Solosky at NASCAR, and he
cool.
Basically echoed the same sentiments as you are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. My last question, this is sort of the question I always end with, is where do you hope to see your company in 18, 24 months?
Yeah, I think in 18, 24 months, our goal, our major goal ahead of us, we have a fundraise goal once this daily fantasy product is out, which is to go raise our Series A. So in 18, 24 months, I think that we'd be past that and have that close and really be working towards some of the things we mentioned, right? Expanding into a few other motorsports series, really ramping up growth. I mean, that's going to be the big goal of the Series A is like a lot of resources spent on user acquisition, and really building the audience out. And I think the third would be, hopefully in 18 to 24 months we'd be growing and would have already rolled out our first kind of more singular against the house type fantasy gaming model where it's less about pools and it's more about picking specific driver predictions and stuff like that. Call it a pick 'em game for lack of a better term. I think those are the three major goals that we would have over the next 18 to 24 months.
Cool. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. And this has been Ross Fruin, the co-founder, co-CEO of GridRival. Thank you so much for speaking with Gaming America.
Thanks a lot, Cameron.